Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Bunny or Gun Bunny, and this is my co-host today, Mr. Og. Yay! This is my hedgehog shoulder spotter slash now my co-host, who is going to help me talk about today's interest, the Hedgehog Mortar. Now, this channel is about my journey through guns and cosplay. And part of that journey is reading a lot of historical books. I have a lot of time when I am road tripping down to Woodland Brutality, and this year, when I went down, I listened to Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. This book outlines how during World War II, Churchill put together a special department to conduct what he called, quote, ungentlemanly warfare. This was creating sabotage weapons and guerrilla forces. Now, while listening to this, I heard one of my favorite possible things get invented. The Hedgehog Mortar. If you don't know me much or haven't seen much of my channel, you may know that I love hedgehogs. If you want to know why, please go check out my video, my hedgehog on my little hedgehog shoulder spotter, Mr. Og here. Here, let's put him on my shoulder, actually. Come on, Og. Now, I immediately was very excited because I heard two of my favorite things, hedgehog and mortar. If you don't know, I own a Grenadier hand mortar, and I would like to own everything that is, has the word mortar in it. That sounds fucking awesome. And so I immediately was like, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about this and make a video about it because fucking hedgehogs are amazing. And butt jokes. Butt sex jokes. This is a very deeply unserious YouTube channel, if you're new. I would like to let you know that some information about my channel. First off, that I am only funded by my Patreon. I will not be doing sponsorships or using YouTube's monetization feature, even though they've asked me twice now. So if you are interested in that, you get extra Gun Bunny content, and it starts at $5. So my link for the Patreon will be in the description below and on screen now. I also have a PayPal box where you're welcome to send me things. I will soon actually be putting together a requested list of guns and tactical gear and stuff that I like, including ammo, if people want to send me things that aren't a subscription-based service, or if you just have stuff lying around. So that will be being compiled soon, and I will keep that updated so people can know, like, oh, what does she own, what does she, etc. I also want to say that I post videos every Monday and Thursday, so come to my channel and check out there. I do a good mix of things. I do everything from competitions to trying new guns to cosplay, shooting in cosplay, more goofy videos kind of like this, making cosplay, and just also pure goofing off. I also generally document my journey through guns and opening a gun shop. Let me think. I have social medias, which are on the screen over here somewhere. Where you can follow me, but I mostly post on YouTube and sometimes on Instagram. So I thought I would share my research, as this is one of the many research rabbit holes I have gone down in my journey through guns. So without further ado, the Hedgehog Mortar. The Hedgehog Mortar, or as the more boring name, the anti-submarine projector. Don't call it that. It sounds so much cooler when you call it. Is a forward-throwing sorry. Oh god. BDSM must sneak into my life in every possible way. My shoulder spotter does not want to stay on my shoulder. Fucking hell, Mr. Og. This is a forward-throwing anti-submarine weapon used during World War II, made by the British Royal, made and used by the British Royal Navy. The Hedgehog Mortar has really interested me ever since I started learning about it, and it was an important weapon invented during wartime, and it had to be retrofitted to ships. But it was a fundamentally important part of the war and was definitely worth, removing some turrets from your ships. This fucking thing was practically just up to 24 spigot mortars clumped together in a ball, or in a kind of formation, that someone thought looked kind of like a hedgehog, and therefore it is now called the Hedgehog, which I love, and I desperately want one. But basically, they just got the idea to stick together a bunch of mortars to make one giant big mortar, and to lob that at boats. That's fucking great. I love this idea. They're like, hey, you know what's even better than one bomb? 24 bombs mashed together, launched at a boat. That pure engineering genius, I gotta say. So the mortars would carry about 35 pounds of Torpex charge, and then they would be and overall generally weighed about 65 pounds. So if you look at the pictures of these, it's a really fucked up looking hedgehog, man. Like that, it does look kind of like a hedgehog, like it has the spikes. But this is not a small weapon. This is like a big thing, and they're all like neat, like kind of clustered together. This is a big, heavy piece of weaponry. There is now a modern version of the Hedgehog, which I have not been able to research for this video, but I think is really interesting, and I just learned that. But I'm curious about, cut this out. The British Royal Navy started using the Hedgehog Mortar, the Hedgehog, in 1942. They were used mainly against German U-boats, and there's a lot of stats, but only because no one, like, I mean, maybe some, but I don't. The different models of the Hedgehog Mortar vary in the pattern, but it was generally a circle or oval pattern that was, depending, either a 90-foot wide and 158-foot long long oval with hedgehogs that are, you know, pretty much 18 feet apart, or even bigger, one that is, or other versions also had a circle with an 800-foot diameter. So from my understanding, how these were deployed is they would be launched ahead of a ship, basically maybe 130 feet-ish, or about 200 yards ahead of a ship, and land in kind of like a circular position. And then they would sink. Now they would only sink about 23 feet per second or 27 meters per second. Better way to measure things. Sorry, I'm sorry, just leave me alone. And then I'll fight you about conversion rates. Let's go. Then they would basically, as they sunk, reach the submerged U-boat at about 200 feet and go. This would only take about 9 seconds after, hitting the water. Which is pretty fast and definitely not enough time for a U-boat to get away from said hedgehogs. Get fucking buggered, bitches. So one thing I think is really interesting about this thing is that all of the mortars could be fired within, basically all 24 mortars could be discharged within 2 seconds. They were launched in pairs, about 2/10 or 2/10 of a second apart, and all at different angles because of how it was shaped. Like, put a picture up on screen, but like it's, a hedgehog's quills kind of go out in all different directions, so they would be getting at all different angles, and you would getting a wider area. This proved extremely effective. Not only were they able to launch 24 mortars in under 2 seconds in that landed in a general circular pattern. This was a generally, organized and condensed array of, I think, 4x6 mortars. The Hedgehog launcher could be reloaded in 3 minutes. The Hedgehog launcher was so effective. That it really, not only could it be fired in 2 seconds, but it could also be reloaded within 3 minutes. And crews that were carrying these on ships were usually carrying 6 reloads. So if you think about that, each reload is full 24 mortars. That's a lot of fucking mortars. That's a lot of bombs that you're shooting at a fixed point. And the way that you're shooting these, you're not shooting them at, where the submarine is. You're shooting it a little bit ahead of where it's about to be. So if you think about this, if you've ever done shooting and you've shot, moving targets, you generally shoot right where the target is going to be, and then when the time passes between the bullet traveling and the target moving, they will collide at the right point if you time it correctly. And so that's how they would do this with the Hedgehog Mortar. Instead of, going up to some stationary U-boats, they would plan they would attack an approaching U-boat, aim, and the mortars, as I said earlier, have a certain amount of time before they sink and then detonate. And so they would kind of just sink and then detonate on top of it, and it would collide in time. Now, the way that these were fired is also really interesting to me when I was going down this rabbit hole. The tubes with the highest trajectories that were going to, going up higher in the parabola of its travel throughout the, air, are launched first, and those with the shallower or flattest trajectory would be projected last. This was all calculated with the timing. The angles of launch were all calculated to match up with the timing of the launch, so that all of the mortars would be entering the water at the same time. This seemed to work pretty well. The amount of mortars that actually went off per mortars that were launched weren't usually matching up. It's not like there weren't more explosions than there were mortars. That makes sense. No, that not all of the bombs would go off every time. But that's, again, why you have 24 of them strapped together. It's just more likely you're going to get more of them to work. And then, if you're only getting 10, you're only going to get 50% to work. This is not real stats. This is just me explaining how this works. If you only have 50% working, it's better to do 24 and have half of that work, getting 12 successful explosions, rather than shooting 12 out, and if it's a 50-50 and if it's 50% are going to go off and you don't know which 50, and then having 6 go off. So being able to launch this en masse like this also gives you more of a range of actually hitting something, just in case gives you more of a range of hitting as they would kind of expand. The reason that these were so successful were not only the ability to create the pattern where they were launched, but also the fact that not only that they were launched in this really cool, synchronized way, and were able to be shot ahead of the boat at an oncoming U-boat, but they had a few other advantages over previously used depth charges. Not only did the Hedgehog mortars sink faster than depth charges, they were able to be launched with more precision. They were able to be launched with precision and were not required to have a set depth before exploding. Now, with depth charges, they would have to have set the depth that the charge would reach before it exploded, and if you guessed wrong, you just get to, blow up water, possibly even causing issues for yourself, or otherwise you just kind of wasted your charge. I personally would not want to accidentally, have it blow up in my own face, literally, because I set the depth wrong. That could also give away important information on the depth charge. The Hedgehog mortars not only sunk faster, but unlike the depth charges, didn't have a set depth when they exploded. Hedgehog mortars would explode upon contact, and that means would explode upon contact, which means that if for some reason they missed and did not hit the U-boat they were aiming for, there would not be any extra repercussions. But that also means that they will explode, they would explode making a direct hit and causing damage directly to a hull, instead of possibly causing, damage slightly adjacent to, where you might get less damage even if you, have the U-boat at the correct, even if you get the right depth, you might not, it might explode kind of adjacent to the U-boat, where it's going to explode. If it's going to explode, it's because it hit the U-boat. The Hedgehog also had 2 other advantages over depth charges. A big part of sea warfare, especially at the time, is sonar. With depth charges, once the charge went off, and it will go off when it hits the correct depth, it would temporarily disable sonar, and basically, even if you wouldn't know if the attack was successful or not until you reassessed and got everything working again, and the sea resettled. This could possibly leave the U-boat with time to escape. With the Hedgehog mortars, they will not exploding unless it was direct hit. They were able to reload and reacquire their target without any damage without losing sonar if it was an unsuccessful hit. Therefore, letting you keep an eye on your target, which is a huge advantage. The other thing the other big advantage that the Hedgehog mortar had over the U-boats, over depth charges was the fact that they didn't have a depth limit. Now, depth charges at the time had a limit to about 600 feet, if I'm correct, and U-boats could go deeper, down to possibly 750 feet, without ever setting off the depth chart. Now, because of the Hedgehog mortars basically just sank until they hit something and then exploded, this kind of circumvented the whole, the U-boats being able to go deeper than the depth charges. The sheer number of mortars also meant that if there were any faulty ones, they were more likely to, get a hit. The Hedgehog mortar was created in wartime, I think tested in a swimming pool, and named after this weird little creature. It's truly an ingenious anti-submarine weapon. It's not only from its contact explosion, the pattern and timing of all the mortars launching, with all of the angled, mortars launching so that they all hit at the right time, like at the same time, but they solve problems of depth charges, and they solve problem of guessing wrong with depth and sonar. They sunk very fast, giving a U-boat less time to, speed out of the way. The Hedgehog mortar, I think, is really interesting and honestly just a really cool design, giving, the idea of strapping a bunch of bombs together a lot more, fun. It's basically like the grape shot of, the highly advanced, cool, well-timed grape shot of, anti-submarine warfare. There are drawbacks, of course. The, 3 minutes I said it took to reload. This also means, and again, this was not a highly trained crew who knew how to operate it. This weapon was invented during the war. This was not something that they had previously and were able to train a bunch of sailors on how to use before the war. So it was, a highly trained crew is definitely something in short supply, especially seeing as this was invented mid-warfare. Not only that, but the mortar needed a very specific target to aim effectively. Not only that, but the Hedgehog mortar needed a very specific target to aim effectively at. Just how, the depth charges had the disadvantage of you having to kind of guess, correctly what depth you were going to be, the U-boat was going to be at, you kind of needed to be able to aim this one really well because you were aiming on where this U-boat was coming to be in front of you in a few seconds. This is not something that you could plan, that you could kind of just wing and just drop a bunch around you. This is 24 mortars at a time. This is not one bomb. It's a lot to fucking launch into the sea, especially if you miss and it doesn't go off. Or if you would just have a very near miss where something, that was a depth charge, if it was a near miss, it still might hit the boat in the shockwave or the repercussion, even if it's not a direct hit, it still might if there's an explosion and it's here, it might still kind of go off near if it's not touching it, right? When it has to contact to hit, you just kind of lost 24 mortars to nothing, and there was no, possible even scratch that was on it from it just kind of going off at a certain time or charge. So there is that gamble of, you give up the depth thing, which is great because you can hit things that are lower and, it's going to explode on contact and it's not going to fuck up your sonar, but then you don't get the chance of, we were just a little bit off, but it still caught the U-boat in the explosion. Eventually, through trial and error, they basically figured out a system to effectively launch these mortars, have the precise target information, and it became a very, very effective tool in fighting submarines. I love that it's named after hedgehogs. I think that's very cool. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my little rant about this. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Hedgehog mortar and meeting Mr. Og. If you want to see how I made his little shoulder strap, please check out my Hedgehog shoulder spotter video. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye!